You can't write a story with a whole bunch of characters in vivid detail without having the backstories of each character revealed, and that is exactly what we're going to do today with Yukari Asagamiyoshimi. Now we're going to come down to things. We did Shoko's backstory. We did a slight bit of Blue, but honestly I want to redo Blue's backstory at some point in the future, so we'll fix that up at some point. But today, I want to do one of the most, I would say, sadder backstories, and just the more brutal ones, honestly. And just to kind of give you a bit more idea on what type of person Yukari is and what leads her up to be the way she is in the story so far. And since I already have a plan for her in the future, what better time to write this story than now? So when it comes down to things, this will touch upon some heavy ass themes. If you can't deal with that, I understand. But when it comes down to things, this story is not an easy one just to digest, honestly. And if you know a bit about Yukari, you already know that she's also, a part of where Shoko is from. So there should be no surprise if these two, meet up in the story, unless you just haven't watched that video, which go listen to the audio in that video, then come back. To start things off, Yukari's life started off in Chuyosoko City, basically the city of smiles, where everything is so peaceful and nice and has prosperity. As long as you smile, everything will be alright. Unfortunately for our main character in this story here, she is not the type of person to smile that much. In fact, a lot of people in her position doesn't. Which is why she is in the slums of that very same city. You don't want to smile, you don't want to do everything that the city requires you to do, perfectly fine. Stay your ass in the slums, and that's essentially where you'll be for the rest of the time. There, a whole new life of the city is just brimming with different types of people, more different than the actual city above them, which is dealing with a lot of horrible ass people, a lot of poor people, a lot of people that do things just to survive, honestly, in the slums. To be honest, everybody's in the same boat and no one really has an advantage, but they still try to make society work down there, even if it's a filthy, disgusting, and frail society at that. This is where Yukari Asagamiyoshimi actually lives. Yukari never actually met her father, but she did have a mother at least. Yukari as a child was honestly a very different child. She doesn't look like the other kids with that marking that was on her chest. That marking that was actually there the moment she was born. So obviously she looks a little different than the other children. And when it comes down to things, the other kids made fun of her, usually just talked about her and just trash talked her in some shape or form, calling her a defective child, and many other things along the lines of that. But Yukari didn't really seem to care, honestly. At the same time, while she wanted to make friends, she already kind of figured out that that wasn't going to be the case or be so easy. So she didn't really care about what people had to say about what she looked like. And when it comes down to things, all she had really that really cared and mattered to her was her mother. Her mother was literally everything, the entire world in her opinion. And when it comes down to things, as long as her mother is there, everything will be okay. And so, with the slums being the way it is and being really trashy, you gotta do basically anything you can to survive. Her mother actually sells drugs to other people, which it's not necessarily a good thing, but they have to do what they gotta do. In fact, she's basically doing all this just so she can make Yukari be able to live and survive in some shape and form, honestly. And it's just not easy. You gotta do what you gotta do to make ends meet. But at the end of every hustling day, Yukari's mother always told Yukari herself that everything at the end of the day will be okay. And she always told her that. And so Yukari always believed that. Despite them moving from home to home to home to home to literally working for different kinds of people, that's what she always told her. And so the last home they ended up moving to was this crazy ass, weird ass, very poor crack house, which basically allows Yukari's mother to work under her bosses, which she does just do what she usually do. But at least gives Yukari a place to stay that isn't out in the blistering cold or out in some type of weird environment where she can't necessarily, be by herself a lot of the time. On Yukari's 13th birthday, her mom gave her a special book, a book of spells and enchantments, which is this very same book she still uses to this day. And when it comes down to things, she only promised to give her the book as long as she's been good, and obviously she has been. But she also wanted to make Yukari promise one thing to her, that she would never use these spells as long as she is around her. Yukari at the time didn't necessarily understand what she meant by that, but she agrees nonetheless. But ever since that day of getting that book, she basically just been in her own world, trying to learn different spells. Even though she's very whack at it, she tries to learn different spells. Doesn't really cast anything, but kind of understands the principles of different methods of casting spells and what kind of spells are they, and enchantments and curses and all the sorts of things. Now the kids around her honestly think she's just a weirdo that likes books or something, but to Yukari, that book was everything. She just kept reading her books day in, day out, it doesn't necessarily matter. To her, that book was literally her own best friend, in a weird way, you know? It was a gift from her mother. To her, that book was literally like a huge love letter straight to Yukari, because that's how much they care about each other. And that book to her is just the literal, somewhat physical embodiment of that love in some shape and form. Unfortunately, things would go downhill from this point though. When it comes to Yukari's mother, when during a drug deal, she basically almost got jumped by a local gang, which was also trying to sell, which is, on their turf, and she almost got jumped, her ass beat for that, which thankfully she did dip and dodge and got the hell up out of there, but she was unable to make the sale, and her employers wasn't necessarily so happy with that. So that night, when Yukari was in her room just reading her spell book, trying to figure things out, she hears a loud thud that happens in the other room. And so when she comes to check it out, she sees her mother being down on the ground. And so Yukari obviously runs to her aid, but the dudes that was obviously employing her mom basically just tied Yukari down to the ground and just pinned her there. And obviously, this is just not a good situation. Both the mother and the daughter is in, so what the hell happens here? Well, what ends up happening changes kind of Yukari's perspective on people in general. What happens is Yukari's mom is basically telling the people that was above her to basically not harm Yukari, to make her be able to just be free, and not necessarily have any type of harm come to her. So they said, alright, that's fine, but we're gonna definitely harm the hell out of you. So they continue to beat her down while Yukari is forced to pretty much practically watch this. And then at the very end of everything, proceeded to McDonald's repay her mom while she is watching, and she can't do anything but cry about it. And then when the finishing touch of everything, they end up popping a shot in the back of her head, killing Yukari's mom. And so once that happened, Yukari was completely broken. They let her go to crawl to her mom, but Yukari's mom is not actually responding. It's hell to her, honestly, that she just lost someone that she cared about. That whole thing about this book being basically a big physical love letter to Yukari from her mom, and now losing the very same person that really the only person in the world that mattered. It's just horrible. And with that, the gang members decide to basically hit Yukari in the back of the head to make her pass out. And then when she came to, her body and her mom and herself were inside of a dumpster. And Yukari basically just crawled out, but also tries to call out to her mom, but obviously she doesn't respond. And so Yukari pulls her own mother out of that dumpster and lean her against the wall of a back alley. And essentially what happens is she's just trying to get her to respond, and finds the book as well that was in the dumpster too, telling her that you gave me this book, right? I wanted you to read me some more spells out of this book and sing me more songs. Please, mom, wake up. And so even though obviously the obvious thing happened, shockingly, Yukari's mother actually started moving. She barely started moving, but she already knew her life was at an end. And so she hugged Yukari one last time, telling her to be strong, that everything will be okay, that she loves Yukari. And with the final breath in her body finally being released, she ends up passing away. Unfortunately for her, she never will get to see her child again, and Yukari is just left as a mess, honestly. Knowing that that's basically the last time she'll ever get to speak to her mother ever again. And so Yukari didn't necessarily know what to do. She was completely broken and beside herself, to the point that she just didn't care anymore. She just didn't care about anything. So she just went by her mother's side and took that very same arm that held her for all these years, wrapped it around herself, and just stayed for a full 24 hours with that rotting corpse that is beside her that used to be her mother. And Yukari had to deal with that, and no one was there to help her. No one was there to uplift her. It was basically Yukari against the world at that point. Yukari was on her own. After the 24 hours passed, Yukari ended up putting a blanket over her mother's body and essentially taking her book and walking on. She doesn't necessarily know what to do anymore. She doesn't have anyone to guide her. She doesn't have anything that she can use to get a way out of this situation or even get into a different situation. There is no possibility of making out of this entire thing. Maybe the whole point of Yukari at this point now is that maybe she should just go back and die with her mother. But that's just not something that I don't think her mother wants. And she realized that too. And so she weighs her options. Do I go back and do the same thing my mother did with the whole drug dealing thing? No, that would just end in travesty. Do I try to make friends with people down in the slums? Why would they? They didn't help us when we needed help, so screw those people. And that's kind of the whole predicament of where she was in her mind, honestly. After a few weeks of not necessarily knowing what to do, she ends up hearing rumors and overhearing people talk about a way to go back up to the top of the city of Chiyosoko City to somehow escape the slums, but the path is very dangerous. And that is something that Yukari kind of listened in on intently, you know? With the world the way it is and how she lost everything, basically, there's not really much holding her to just really just stay in the slums anymore, is it? In fact, the more that she kept hearing about the upper side of the city, the more that she kept hearing about the things that they're doing up there to make the city a better place for the people that is up top, the more she absolutely hated and resented that city and every person that lives in it. And so when it comes down to things, she wanted to reform that city. If not hell, she'll just basically destroy it with her magic. That's essentially what Yukari wanted to do. And she was full on set to doing that. So when she kept overhearing the people talking about the sewer and finding a way to go up to the city, that will be her ticket. Obviously, the path is dangerous. The sewer is filled with reptilian monsters that could easily kill any person. Oftentimes, when people do go through this path, either they don't come back at all, or they end up becoming arrested at the top of the city, which is easy to do considering the fact that, you know, it's very easy to differentiate a person that's from the top layer of the city versus the slum layer. And Yukari doesn't necessarily care what the danger is, she is going to the top. And so when it comes down to things, she talks to people that can let her go into that sewer and honestly get to that top layer. They didn't really care about her, but they did express their concern about what will happen if she does go. But Yukari didn't care at this point. She has literally nothing to lose. So when it comes down to things, they tell her to come back the next day so we can get ready for the whole sewer adventure. During that very same day, Yukari ended up seeing also the soup kitchen, which has a lot of military and a lot of detailed personnel and a lot of people just surrounding it, with some people as well. And overhearing some of those conversations, she ended up hearing that they just heard that, you know, somebody of the royal family is serving up food for the people of the slums, and honestly doesn't necessarily understand why they're doing it, but it's so annoying that they are here because they want to show and flex their richness, trying to help us, like we need their help or something like that. And Yukari didn't get anything to eat, which honestly she hasn't eaten for a while, but she didn't even eat anything from the soup kitchen, but she did want to see who is in this royal family that she needs to kill. Who is the person that is making people like this in the slums suffer, and also 10 times more making her suffer. And so she did go into the kitchen just to simply see who it is for a little bit. And then that's when Shoko saw her, and that's when Yukari saw her just a little bit, but she dipped off before she actually made full-blown eye contact. So yeah, Shoko did end up seeing Yukari in the soup kitchen. They just didn't get a chance to interact in. And when it comes down to things, that right there is enough to make the future events kind of happen. So when it comes down to things, the next day happens, the soup kitchen event is over, but Yukari has a journey to go into the sewer. And so without any type of hesitation, she went in, knowing some of the spells of what she has learned. She absolutely dominates the monsters in the sewer. She dominates everything that is thrown at her way. She doesn't necessarily give a damn. She will do everything it takes because she has nothing else to live for. And her anger, while casting those spells, made those spells 10 times more powerful than it is. The level 1 spell of fire becomes a level 3 spell. A level 2 thunder becomes a level 6 thunder. Like, it goes on, and with ease, Yukari just completely obliterates every single monster that came at her. It was devastating, honestly. Once that she finally reached the top layer of the city and got her way outside the sewer, she noticed a bunch of cheering is happening from the streets. She noticed that there was a parade that was basically going on, and she didn't necessarily understand why is everybody celebrating. There is nothing to celebrate about with your fake ass living large type of lifestyles, your fake ass emotional personalities and state of minds. There is nothing to be happy about. There is nothing to smile over. And so she did watch the parade for a little while, just because she didn't understand anything of what was going on, just to see what the hell people were being so happy and cheerful about. And it was the royal family car that was also driving through, and every single person in the royal family has separate cars, just in case reasons, you know? So when it comes down to things, as you know, Shoko was riding one of those cars, and she was basically looking out into the crowd. And the people near Yukari doesn't necessarily like Yukari because she smells, she isn't smiling, she looks like she came from the slums, which they're about to do something to her, but then that's when Shoko stops the car, and then she ends up going towards Yukari and saying that she's super cute, that she is adorable looking, and that she wants to invite her into her car. Which Yukari, again, was perplexed by this and doesn't necessarily know what the hell was going on, but she took the offer anyway. And in Yukari's mind, she was like, a person in the royal family taking me in? This might be easier for my revenge too now. And so when it comes down to things, she got into the car where Shoko was, and essentially they were off. And so Yukari was very confused, and she didn't say anything to Shoko, but Shoko was just making sure that she was safe, because she was like, you're not smiling, and you already look like you're from the slums, which, in fact, I think I've seen you before. So, I think I've seen you at the soup kitchen, actually, which means you are from the slums. You gotta be careful around here. If someone were to figure that out, then who knows what would happen to you. The people up top would not take pity on you, even if you are a child. Yukari was completely unfazed, but then Shoko asked a particular question that even kind of moved Yukari in a weird way. Shoko basically asked the question of, when you notice that the facade isn't working, and you're the only person that honestly wants to point it out, what are you left with? And so for a brief minute of time, no one really said anything, and then Yukari just says loneliness, which is somewhat the first time Shoko has ever really noticed anybody really understanding her in a way, you know? Because obviously Yukari is from a part of the city where happiness and shit just doesn't exist, and she obviously knows that the facade up top is very, you know, fake. And when it comes down to things, Shoko even starts to realize a little bit too that things in the city isn't as they seem to be, which is why she has started to lose her smile in a way. And so now that they both kind of connected over it, they start talking a little bit more, and they start talking about their ideas and ideals in some shape and form, even if it's only just minor conversation. At the end of the parade, they end up taking Yukari in as family, honestly, and make her a new part of the royal family. And even though they wanted to grant her the title of Toyokawa, Yukari refused. She wanted to keep her mother's name, her last name, Asagamiyoshimi, which is what she kept with until the end of time, honestly, because she was not changing it for any of these people at the top. Just what? So her mother just be another memory of someone that's from the slums that no one really thought about at all? no, she will be one of those people that you will remember. And even though Yukari was taken in and honestly had a good meal and had some clothes and actually was not having to worry about going to the slum anymore, she still felt mad. She still felt angry about the whole society up top. She still felt angry that she's even in the same city as these people. She hates that she's even in the royal family, that she connected with the daughter of the royal family. It just disgusted her to no end, honestly. And so when that very night comes through with her living in her new home, a voice hits her and it starts talking to her. And despair is actually in her ear for once. And considering the fact that, her life has been full of nothing but despair, and the fact that this is the first time it's actually rearing its head, that's some nonsense. But anyway, despair basically is like, you hate them, don't you? And so Yukari just like, who? What is. What? And so the spirit's like, it's alright. It is part of human nature. If you do so hate them so very much, then follow what your heart wants to do. And then so with that, the spirit basically leaves, which gives Yukari the incentive and the idea to want to kill the rest of the royal family, honestly. Starting with Shoko. So basically Shoko is at this point asleep in bed because it's nighttime. And so Yukari comes through her room silently and puts a hand on her head. And essentially is about to use a fire spell to burn Shoko's body alive. But for some reason, she can't bring herself to do it. Even though she wants to and actually wants to try to enchant the fire spell to Shoko, there's something in her telling her not to do it. In fact, it's a very loud sound. It's muffled, but it sounds like a no in her head. And it's a soft but gentle no. A no that a voice that she kind of remembers a bit too. It was the voice of her mother, who is somewhat speaking to her to tell her not to do this. And so Yukari doesn't. And she just goes back to her room and just goes back to sleep like nothing happened. After a year and some change living with that family, Yukari actually became fairly decent. She actually didn't start any type of revenge nonsense. She still hated the top people of the city, but she didn't necessarily have any time to really mess with them like that. And even though she was, not necessarily knowing exactly what to do with her life, she didn't want to bother dealing with destroying the entirety of the top people. And so when it comes down to things, Shoko noticed that she didn't have anything to do, and so she basically told Yukari, why not become a pop idol? And so Yukari was very strange about this. She didn't necessarily know how to perceive this, but Shoko was going on and on about how she liked pop groups and thinks she will make a very cute idol, and also heard that Yukari was singing to herself sometimes some tunes that her mother gave her at some point in time. And so she was like, why don't you just become a pop idol? I know you can do it. Please, please, please. I'll buy all your albums. And so Yukari was very reluctant to do it, but she was like, alright, I'll look into it. Fine. And we'll just see what happens. And Shoko from that point forward was very hands-on with trying to help her start off with her pop idol group, honestly. And when it comes down to things, Yukari actually became a very big successful pop idol. She was the best pop idol in the entire city, making countless amounts of albums and countless amounts of songs, and honestly in a short amount of time got herself over with the easiness of her voice. It just is that damn easy for her. Rize Kujikawa would be pissed. But anyway, she spent basically that entire year just getting her ass over as a pop idol and figuring out her life on that type of term, and gathering so many thousands, no, millions of fans within the city to honestly just indulge her music, which was a fun thing for her. And it actually, for the first time in her life, took off, the revenge and her mom's death and everything out of her mind, because she was doing something that actually genuinely made her happy. One day, her group was actually about to perform for a stage and on a song and for her audience. And essentially, they were about to head out there. And while she headed out there, the world stopped for a moment. And she was very confused about this. And despair ends up reaching her once again, saying, "Oh, did you just forget about your revenge? I guess your mother's death doesn't mean much to you now, does it?" And with that very statement was enough to get Yukari mad and kind of snap back into her old way to kind of want to go back and try to, take over the city. Not kill these people, no, but she wants to take over it first to see if it's possible to reform the city and to make everybody understand the pain that she went through. And so the spirit was like, "That's what I like to hear. Now, let me give you a gift." And so the spirit gives her an ability to corrupt the masses, basically being like, "You wanted to reform society, reform the way these people think and how they live their lives. Well, now I'm giving you the chance to do it. Have fun, feel free. You don't owe me anything. Go on, cast that little enchantment over these people." And so when it comes down to things, Yukari, using her corruption to spare ability, just says, "Kneel before me." And so every single person that heard her voice in that city, no matter who it is, and no matter how much they may not didn't want to do it, ends up kneeling before her. And and with this, Yukari was actually frightened about this ability. She was actually not necessarily knowing what to do. Like, yeah, the book in her, the enchantment book that she has, yes, it does have spells where mind control is a possibility and things, but never onto this imaginable level. And so when it comes down to things, Yukari's mind started to go in a very crazy insanity type of way, where her hair turned white and everything was not necessarily okay for this girl. And so she was barely clinging on, and she did manage to cling on enough so she doesn't go insane, but still, what happened with her basically making everyone kneel was just too much. And so she ran off the stage, and everybody kind of wondered where the hell she went. And the whole stage concert was basically canceled because what the hell happened? But no one really knows it except her. From that point forward, all her concerts from the future will be on hiatus until she can get herself back together. Shoko was very concerned for her at the time, even visiting her room, basically telling her that everything will be okay, even though she doesn't necessarily understand why she had to cancel all her concerts. And so with that, Shoko was literally the only wall that Yukari had to lean on, even though Yukari didn't still like Shoko too much, even though she didn't understand why she took her in and all this type of stuff, and why she accepted her, she still was the only wall to lean on. And so, at the very same time, Shoko was basically just trying to comfort Yukari, tell her that they're sisters, that they honestly can just be together and tell each other anything, and do whatever it takes to, help each other out. That's essentially what that type of support system was for Yukari. And Yukari did lean on that support even if she didn't understand anything. Even if she didn't necessarily like Shoko all the way, she did lean on her. And that was just enough that she needed. So the next week, where basically Yukari was kind of confused on everything, she left the top layer of the city, went back down to the slums, and basically as a pop idol now, re-emerged there, and just everybody was very confused on why she's even here. Everybody knows who she is because pop idolness, but also know that she was also that cursed looking child, that defective child. And so she only had one goal in mind down in the slums, one goal to put all this to rest to her, and that was to cause chaos. She basically first started with where her mother was killed and basically used, and essentially found that old gang that was still living in their house. And so they was like, "Oh damn, I guess the pop out of life wasn't for you. Seems like you came back here just like your mother did," which, by the way, gotta say, that vagina on her, shit, that was the best damn thing I ever had. And so when it comes down to things, Yukari was not effing with any of this. They tried to touch her, but even at that point, she just whispered mania. And essentially, the person that was talking all that shit about wanting to get inside of Yukari's mother and how delicious it was, he ends up start ripping his face off, and then started crashing his head into literally every corner of the room that he was in, because he was just going crazy. This is that corruption spell in the word, that corruption despair in work, honestly, and essentially just making things go worse from worse and just completely killing himself in the worst impossible way. Basically continues to rip his face off and crashing his head into different parts of the wall, just making sure that he's not necessarily going to be living from this at all, or even be mentally fine to be living through all this at the end of the time. And at the end of all things, he ends up just falling over by the pain and excruciating blood loss and just dying, as he kind of should, honestly, let's be perfectly fair. Yukari went kinda crazy herself in this entire thing. While she was watching that man basically go crazy, she basically grabbed a knife from the kitchen, a very dirty ass kitchen by the way, and taking one of the knives after he passed out and cut off his head, because that's how Yukari rolls. She was not effing with anything at this point. You take something that she loved, you take the one thing that she cared about, and you're gonna get effed over in the worst possible way. So when it comes down to things, the one other dude that was with that guy was freaking the hell out because he didn't want to die either, but his time was coming. So Yukari basically made shadow clones, or mainly super twisted looking shadows that has a physical form, and basically held up the guy and essentially did the same action of what they did to Yukari's mom by basically forcing him on the ground and using him in that sort of way. And it was so bad that he didn't want to take it anymore and he took his own life. And that was essentially the end of those two, and the revenge was best served with a huge shadowy dick inside, which is very jacked up, but it is what it is, and it's still, again, well deserved. But when it comes down to things, once she left that house with the blood of her enemies basically all over her at that point, everyone saw the monstrosity that she became. That horrible, evil looking child that they once thought she was actually came through. But she used her corruption despair again on them, on everybody on the slums basically. And she didn't necessarily give a damn on what they believed in or what they thought about her. She just wanted to use them. And so she basically says, at a certain point in time, I want all of you to rise against the people up top. You will all fight, and if you die, then it's no concern of me. And when it comes down to things, that's essentially what it is. At a certain point in time, at a certain date, they will attack the people up top. And they will start going, having this whole massive war between the top people and the people of the slums. And that's essentially how it is. Once Yukari did that, she basically went back to the top and dipped, and essentially just went back to her room. The day after that, Yukari went into Shoko's room, trying to talk to her for a few minutes, till asking her for her trust, which, if you again know Shoko's storyline, you already know what's about to happen. So basically, Yukari puts that weird seal on her stomach. Not only because in the story, I believe it was a seal that bounds her to her lover, but it's not only that, you know, that the seal that Yukari puts onto Shoko, but it's also a tracking seal. Because what Yukari already did, initiating that type of war to the people from the slums, she's basically going to have to disappear for a while. She doesn't necessarily know how or where, but she's going to have to disappear. And basically puts that tracker on Shoko so she'll know where she is in the future. And when that moment happened, obviously Shoko passed out. And so Yukari basically left the room, and essentially this is the last time Yukari will ever be in this world. She doesn't actually get to see what the hell happens when it comes to the people in the slums fighting against the people at the top. She doesn't see that. So despair comes through her again, and basically it's like, see, now you know what real pain is like to be shared with others. Feelings should be shared with others, and now that you've done it, there is no other greater work for you to do here. So let's go. And so despair basically takes her out of that dream world into a different world, essentially putting her in limbo for a very long time, you know, because that's kind of how it was. Essentially, when she came to, she was in this back alley in a different world, and doesn't necessarily know where she was or what type of environment she was in. And essentially, all she heard was a very, very familiar voice that should be, you know, noticed by you guys. Well, well, well. We found another one. Honestly, today has been a very productive day. And so obviously Junko found Yukari as well, as you already know because they were enemies at one point. But when it comes down to things, So basically, what you need to know is that Shoko and Yukari were found in the same day. Junko just split them off from each other so they don't necessarily find each other in some shape or form, you know, because they're both related in some shape or way. So when it comes down to things, essentially, Junko took Yukari, and when Yukari came to, she obviously wanted to know more about where her sister was and asked Junko. And so when it comes down to things, she was like, oh, your sister is somewhere, but we gotta find her, honestly. I can help you with that. Even though Yukari full blown knows where she is, and Junko was just straight up, lying, she basically just went along with it because she wanted to know more about what this world was that she was in. So Junko basically put Kodako and her into a team to, make sure the spirit kind of spreads properly through these worlds. And while she was doing that, she was also going off a long tangent about how she hated Jay and basically wanted to see Jay fall and be basically be the lapdog to her. And so essentially, Yukari was kind of intrigued by this J person, essentially. Wanted to know more about who they were, or to be honest, understand why he was going against Junko and what she wanted. Granted, if she's lying about where Shoko is, knowing that she full-blown has her, then I need to meet this person. Maybe they can help me get away to find and get to my sister, honestly. Once Shoko was saved from Junko's, manipulation, and Jay had her at that point, that's when Yukari kind of realized too that Junko doesn't have Shoko anymore. She's somewhere else. I don't necessarily know how or why, but she's somewhere else. And so when it comes down to things, especially when it comes to the Lolly and Shota arc, where Kodako was basically taking over the entire safe haven, that's when the real investigation work began. And so she obviously met Jay, and everything kind of went from that point forward. So that is essentially the entirety of the backstory of Yukari Asagamiyoshimi. This is a lot of talking. When it comes down to things, I really want to just get over, how she was feeling and how everything was, and for her, how everything kind of is mentally in her own state of mind. It's the reason why she is the way she is, And when it comes down to things, there is some details I didn't really specify on, like, certain personality traits, but it's kind of fine. It is what it is. It's not necessarily that big of a deal, but I really wanted to mention mainly the big main things that really affected her life and to the way she honestly ended up becoming when it comes down to things. But yeah, that's basically everything I really wanted to say for Yukari. Obviously, we got actually a lot more stories to go through because we got Symphony at some point. We gotta do Aoki, which I already know somewhat the story of that. We also gotta do Blue again. And then some of y'all asked for Jay's story, which I'll try to see what I can do, but it's probably not gonna be the way I wanted to do it in the first place. But we'll see how it kind of goes. And, then we also have to have, like, some other small things to do, but overall, it is what it is. And I just really want to get this out before the next start of the next arc come through. So yeah. So anyway, that's basically all I really wanted to do for this one. So hopefully you did enjoy. If you did, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification on your way out. Also follow me on the socials so you like to know this channel. Patreon is available as well. And until then, it's your boy Jay, signing off. Have a blessed day.